DNA is an antenna to the Creator that operates like a Tesla coil because of the creative juice in you, water.
The vibration of water around the double helix of the completed human DNA creates a vibrational antenna. And now when you hit that with light energy, it vibrates at a very specific frequency.
When we placed these 3 E's on people's acupressure points and then took those energy readings using that instrumentation, between 80 and 85% of the time, we always saw one organ system, one energy meridian, consistently enhanced: the pineal gland, the spiritual processing station. The entire universe is spinning, just like your DNA, your genetics. And it's spinning as the mathematics is dictating. The numbers themselves are a tip-off. Let me give you the fundamental, the rudimentary origin of the numbers. Here it is. The most important numbers, 3, 6s, and 9s. Again, Tesla, who created a Tesla coil. Tesla coils, energy amplifiers. Your DNA is an energy amplifier, a coil, operating by the 3, 6s, and 9s primarily. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, you've probably looked at engines or motors, magnets that have been wound with copper wire. When you do that, when you wind the copper, coil the copper around the magnet, it enhances the energy dramatically. That's what your DNA is. It's an antenna to the Creator. Technically, the scientists call it photon-phonon emissions for intercellular communications. That's the primary function of DNA. Phonon is sound. Photon is light. So sound and light signaling. And before there was light, there was the water and the sound. So sound and light signals come into the cells, and DNA is in a matrix of water. Your DNA is an antenna to the Creator that operates like a Tesla coil because of the creative juice in you, water. Specifically, most frequently, the matrix of DNA is the 6-sided hexagonal-shaped structured water molecule. And this is from science that Lee Lorenzen shared with me, and he shared this with Dr. Emoto. This is from the journal Science. This is from Ron Sakely's team, University of California, Berkeley, water scientists, who took DNA and evaluated how much energy potential is held in the genetic strands, and then changed the structured water matrix. They pulled the water out of the matrix and then rechecked to see if the strands were still spiritually or energetically active. And so here you can see 4 strands of DNA in that beautiful Tesla coil structure. Here particularly you can see, if you lay this on its side, you see the structure of the double wing in Rodin's infinity pattern. And here you see negative 212. Here is negative 217 as an energy measure. If they eliminated as little as 8% of the structured water out of the matrix, you lose the structure. It unfolds, and look at what happens to the energy signaling. Negative 12.3 goes down dramatically. Praying over water to have a dramatic effect. Dr. Emoto's greatest contribution, that you can take muddied water like this. This is actually 20,000 magnification of water that is consistent with all of the municipal water systems, all the fluoridated and chlorinated water systems that the public health officials allegedly give us to protect us. In fact, they're simply poisoning us. At the highest levels, it is absolutely certain that there's no need for this. You think about this. We now know that the most expensive, and they're the most expensive and most effective of all of the water purification systems in the industry, is ultraviolet light. The light, the frequency resonance, kills the pathogens. How expensive would it be for us to really install all that type of technology for mass municipal water systems? It really wouldn't be that significantly expensive. There would be certainly ways to reduce the cost, to make it cost effective, cost beneficial. But instead, what are we doing? We're poisoning the system, poisoning God, poisoning the triune God, poisoning the water, poisoning the bloodstreams of humanity. That's sick. That's not public health. That's genocide. And so the concept that you could take the worst impure water and with faith and trust and loving, heartfelt intent, dramatically change it, purify it, truth that shall set us free from environmental toxicity.
When I was doing research a number of years ago for my book, Killer Fish, I was stunned when they looked at the 250 most pristine waters in the world, notably in the North and South Pole, people not living, any marginal amounts of people living there. And every bit of the water had pharmaceutical drugs in it.
Do you know what's in your drinking water? A shocking Associated Press investigation found various pharmaceuticals in the drinking supplies of at least 41 million Americans.
New worries tonight about the safety of America's water supply. In the first nationwide investigation of its kind, the Associated Press found that at least 41 million of us are drinking water that contains traces of prescription drugs.
Really, whether you need it or not, it's a virtual medicine cabinet in your tap water if you live in many, many areas across the country. The list includes over-the-counter pain medication, mood stabilizers, even hormones.
Anti-epileptics were found in drinking water of Southern California. A sex hormone was found in San Francisco's water. 3 medications and an antibiotic were found in the water supply of Tucson, Arizona. And a mood stabilizer was found in the water of New Jersey. And that's just to name a few. 5-month investigation of 62 metropolitan areas and 51 smaller cities found many drinking water suppliers, including bottled water companies, do not even test for the presence of drugs in the water. The utilities that do test for drugs often don't tell customers about the trace amounts of medications in their water.
Home filters aren't designed to remove all drugs, and bottled water often comes from the very same source as tap water.
Doctor, can you talk about bottled water a little bit? Is that any safer, or how do we know?
Well, you know, if you could buy bottled water in some country besides the United States, you would know, because other countries put a label on their water that says, you know, how much calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, fluoride it has in it, bromine, and trace minerals. In our country, they tell you how much fat there is in your water and whether or not it's got any sugar in it. Well, this is a food label that the water companies resisted putting a bottled water label on it because they don't want to tell you. We've gone through and measured a bunch of waters, and Whole Foods, just about the same as tap water in terms of fluoride. How about Trader Joe's? Yep, same as tap water. Well, how about Arrowhead? Same as tap water. So might as well just take a hose and fill up the thing, put a lid on it, and sell it. What do you think? So we got terrible labels, and we've got companies that are willing to take advantage of that. You know, nice, clean-looking label, and basically it's junk water.
For about 100 years, we know we're slow learners. For about 100 years, the phosphate fertilizer industry, which takes phosphate rock and heats it up with sulfuric acid to make soluble phosphate for fertilizers. The rock is not soluble, and to use it as fertilizer, you've got to make it into a soluble product. They heat it up with sulfuric acid, and that drives off 2 gases, hydrogen fluoride and silicon tetrafluoride. These 2 gases decimated the vegetation in the areas of these plants. They crippled cattle. The cattle came down with skeletal fluorosis. We have pictures of this, videotapes of this. And in Florida, it damaged the citrus groves in the close proximity of the plants. So after 100 years, they said, whoops-a-daisy, I think we should remove those toxic gases. So they put a wet scrubber in, and all it consisted of was a spray of water. And that spray of water converts these toxic gases into a solution called hexafluorosilicic acid.
But the biggest problem is that once you put it in the water supply, it absorbs directly through your skin. So what are you going to do? How are you going to bathe the baby? Are you going to, you know, go get bottled water for the baby? Are you going to take a shower? Or are you going to, you know, leave town to take a shower? It's exactly the same problem as the lead problem from exhaust pipes. You know, if you've got, you know, 100 million cars driving around spewing lead, it ends up in everything. It ends up on the soil, it ends up in your hair, it ends up in your lungs. If you've got municipalities putting silicon fluoride in the water, you end up with it in everything. It's in the beer. If you buy a local craft brewery, it's in your pasta. If you go to have lunch at your health food store, it's in your rice. If you go to the restaurant and rice dinner, if it's in your bowl of soup, it's in everything. Everything that touches that water ends up contaminated with that silica fluoride.
I think the most important thing to recognize about fluoride is that it's extremely toxic. It is very active biologically, interfering with many basic biochemical processes, enzymes, G proteins, hydrogen bonds, and so on. So it shouldn't surprise us that there's a wide range of health effects that are attributed to fluoride. But the bottom line is that fluoride is extremely active biologically, that the first opponents of fluoridation going back to the 1950s were biochemists, including scientists like James Sumner, who won a Nobel Prize for enzyme chemistry. And incidentally, there is no doubt that fluoride damages health, because millions of people in India, China, and parts of Africa have had their health ruined by fluoride. The people have been crippled by fluoride and many other health effects.
The cats have taught me something else, because I could pour this Mountain Valley water and I could pour it in a dish, and I leave that dish flat and leave it there for 2 days. They will not touch that water. But I've flushed the toilet. I've flushed the toilet and the water's swirling. They'll choose that water that's been circulating and cycling, or alive. They prefer it out of the faucet, but they'll take the toilet. But alive, it's like living water. It's like they can sense that there's something different about the water as it's alive, as it's moving, and there's something happening there.
What's happening at the atomic level, that you're witnessing there, is clumping. And so when you have stagnant water, or water that goes through non-natural flow states, if you put a 90-degree bend in a plumbing line, which there's thousands in every single household, all those 90-degree turns break it out of normal flow state, and you get clumping of the water molecules. And so coming out of the tap or sitting in a glass of water that you just poured, typically you've got clumps of 75 to 100 water molecules that are clumped together, and they're in an electrical relationship to each other, a biochemical kind of colloidal structure. When you put it into a natural vortex around a pebble in a stream, or swirling in that toilet bowl as you described, that vortex energy that's there, it breaks that organization of those large clumps, and you can get down to levels of 5, 12 molecules of water, which is now far more biologically active, can be absorbed through cell membranes much better, all of that. So we have certainly learned to kill water through every mechanism that we do in municipal water systems and hydraulics around all of our water systems. But interestingly, as soon as water passes into a cell, which remains one of the most mysterious things in biology, we still don't really know how water gets into a cell, because we just have these passive channels called aquaporins in the surface of cells that have no pump mechanism. We have pumps for everything else: sodium, potassium, minerals, insulin. Like, we have all kinds of ways to get crap into cells. Water being the most important thing for cellular health, we can't figure out how that thing knows how to passively push through a cell. There's no way to suck it in, but it seems to be related to the electrical potential across the cell membrane. So like a battery, the more you insulate between the positive and negative charge, the higher the potential energy there. And so it's by creating this extraordinary charge potential across a very small distance of a cell membrane with perfect resistance through that phospholipid double membrane, you create an enormous electrical charge potential. And it's thought that it's the electrical charge potential that's being produced by the mitochondria as it translates light energy from your food back into light energy, electrons, is creating the electrical opportunity for water to enter the cell. And when it enters, it immediately crystallizes. When you've cut yourself, you've never leaked water out of yourself, which is so weird because you're 70% water.
Well, what do you mean? What's blood?
Blood is not from the cell, right? So you'll have blood, which is a liquid state, but it's outside of the cell. When you cut yourself, you'll disrupt millions, if not billions, of human cells, skin cells, deep dermis, all of this. No water leaks out. And so you're cutting through massive amounts of tissue. Heart surgery is just so dramatic. And there is no leak. There's no water there because it's not a liquid state. It's actually in this fourth phase of water, which looks like a dense jello. And what it is, miraculously, is a crystalline structure of that H2O. And that crystalline structure lines up along the DNA of the strand of the virus, or the human DNA that you receive from mom and dad, to create an antenna system. And so the vibration of water around the double helix of the completed human DNA creates a vibrational antenna. And now when you hit that with light energy, it vibrates at a very specific frequency. And I believe that what gives you the ability to wake up every day thinking you're Aubrey and not me is not actually a cognitive process. It's actually a vibrational event where you always know. And if somebody came along and said, your name's not actually Aubrey, your parents lied to you, your name's Phil, that's no problem for you because you say, all right, I'm actually Phil, but you haven't lost track of who you are at that biologic level because you're still the same frequency of resonance.
Right.
No, there's an awareness of self. There's a coherence of memory of your body that's held at the water structure and its resonance around the DNA strand. Memory's all in the water. We've never found a database in the brain or peripheral nervous system that allows for long-term memory. We have short-term memory in the hippocampus, which is a tiny little, size of an almond in the side of the brain. That's where we do short-term memory processing into long-term memory, but it disappears into this black box of long-term memory. We don't know where the hell that's happening in the neurology side, but we know through water structure that water carries memory at the molecular level in an exquisite state. And, there's been bizarre abilities now to look at atomic structure to understand vibrational input. There's a TED Talk, I think 10 years back or something like that maybe, but that showed how, I think it was a Stanford group, had been able to reproduce a conversation that happened in a room with a bag of chips, an open bag of chips, and they studied the atomic structure shift in the bag of chips to recreate the vibrational input that would have happened to create those, before and after events of the atomic structure of the chip bag, and then show that can be then translated back into voice.
Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb.
But ridiculous as this experiment looks, it was actually really important because we were able to recover this sound.
Mary had a little lamb.
That's mind-blowing even to fathom. I don't even think I even understand it.
Nobody really does. The point being, vibration affects structure, and the memory of water is in this interface between the crystalline structure of the gel state of water in our cells and that electrical vibration from sunlight, from food translation into energy, all of these things.
I came up with these little energy patches, stickers and Klingons called the 3E, or the water energizers. And what it was is simply the perfect circle of sound. The initial patch, you know how Dr. Emoto recommends putting love and thanks on water, and it changes the resonance, the words and the letters and the intent, mostly the loving intent, because you're so powerful, because the energy is in your heart, the intelligence is in your heart's in communion with Creator, so that the energy of the positive loving intent, like you heard Dr. Pearson say, that, in a laboratory miles away, if you start exercising, your heart cells are going to reflect that miles away, or you're going to have this intelligent communication into the water, which is the blessed creative juice. We all know, those of us who have any sense of reasonableness and faith, that prayer works. How does it work? Because there's a loving, heartfelt intent to do good. And that loving, heartfelt intent is connected directly to the musical mathematical matrix in the source. And so the concept of taking the sacred geometry and mathematics of the musical divinity, putting it into the image of a perfect circle of sound, putting 528 highlighted at the center, putting love and thanks. Now you can see how I came up with this. You don't need a rocket scientist degree to realize it. And so what Dr. Emoto did was he took it back to Japan, sent it to Japan, and there's messages in water. He's the researcher who has 3 New York Times bestsellers now. One is called The Message in Water. The other is called The Hidden Messages in Water. He takes under 20,000 magnification, crystalline flash frozen water that's been prepared for 12 hours with whatever you're trying to see if it has some sort of a change in structuring or a message in the water. This was one of the beautiful crystals that he sent me back that gets created by the 3E, which when we tested it on the electrodermal machinery, there's little electrodes you can put on your skin, and it runs into machines, which diagnoses how much energy is coming out of certain acupuncture meridians. And then the most sophisticated ones can actually do a very amazing analysis of everything. I mean, the most advanced units today can do 9,000 tests in 2 minutes. Tell you everything that you've forgotten about your birth, about everything. And then, because it's frequency, it's all energy, they can flip. Again, like cures like. So if you've got a wave, let's say, that's going in this direction, causing disease or too much amplitude or too much energy here, you hit it with the opposite, equal and opposite to cancel it out. Real simple. It's based on what I showed you. Creative technology, word, sound, frequency, mathematics, resonance, waveforms, and the technology based on that. This, by the way, is one of the beautiful crystals that Dr. Emoto showed. You know, we pray over water. How about a message in the water that the water is praying for us? Here you have a water molecule, a massive amount. Actually, this is about 1 million water molecules that came together in a specific shape to deliver a message to humanity, which is we're praying for you to get it together. And interestingly enough, when we place these 3 E's on people's acupressure points and then took those energy readings using that instrumentation, between 80 and 85% of the time, we always saw one organ system, one energy meridian, consistently enhanced: the pineal gland, the spiritual processing station.
What's the best quality water? And you heard me use the term biologically active water. So what is that? Water's a problem today because it's so radioactively contaminated. I'll just say fluoride is carcinogenic. In fluoride areas in the U.S., people live less long, have more hip fractures, and incidentally, they do not have any less cavities. That's a whole mythology got created. Fluoride also calcifies your pineal gland, which is actually pretty important. It creates emotional imbalance and makes at least women infertile. Accelerates the aging process significantly into metabolic poison. 1 milligram or more is associated with cancer. Not a good thing. So, okay, but you have all these contaminants in the water. What to do? What to do? Aside from really fresh spring water, which most people don't have access to, the best thing is either water distillation or reverse osmosis. But now, with the amount of radiation, I'm more strongly recommending water distillation because the radioactive nucleotides, when you distill the water, evaporate out. With reverse osmosis, they don't evaporate out, they're still going to stay in the water. With water distilling, you get out the most of everything. From my opinion, distilled water is actually an aggressive water and a dead water. So in a gallon, or basically 4 liters, I will put a pinch of highly active salt. That will give you 50 parts per million, which is a really nice mineral content. That's just step 1. The next thing is, been disorganized as a water, you have to structure it to hold energy. Water holds energy. What's available here is a thing called crystal energy, which is microcrystal clusters that structure the water. There's more sophisticated machines coming out that structure it more potently, called the GIA machine, GIA, which you can get in the United States. We sell at the tree. So the crystal energy is good, and you put 25 drops per gallon in. Now we've structured it, we have minerals to hold the structure, and now you want to energize it. So you take a wooden spoon and stir it to make a vortex, and it pulls energy into the water. Go in both directions. So now we've energized it, we've structured it, we've mineralized it, and all that's left is one more thing for you to personally bless it, because water holds your blessing. That research is there. You bless your water, and now you have really good water. And it's not expensive. A lot of the water in the bottles is very hyped, and it comes in plastic bottles, which is not good for you. You want to store your water in glass bottles. What we do is we put a tachyon disc underneath to keep the water energized. Now you have the highest quality water at a very, very inexpensive price, and you're in control. You actually know what's in the water.